Welcome everyone to Cracking the Rich Code. I am Miss Marilee, and today I have another awesome co-author joining me from book number 7. If you are not familiar with Cracking the Rich Code, it's a book series, an entrepreneur book series by Jim Britt and Kevin Harrington. And we have about 20 authors in each book, and we are now up to books number 7. And it is phenomenal. If you have not checked it out, I suggest that you do. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Amazon. And today I'm going to bring up Dr. Dennis Reyna. Is it Reyna? I apologize. I'm going to get a correction on that. He's the co-founder of Reina Trust Building. It's a pioneering thought leader on deepening engagement, managing change, developing teams, and fostering leadership effectiveness through strengthening trust that produce business results. Speaker, consultant, and executive coach for over 30 years, Dennis specializes in measuring, developing, and restoring workplace trust globally. Co-authored award-winning best-selling books, Trust and Betrayal in the Workplace, the third edition, and Rebuilding Trust in the Workplace. Among his awards, Global Strategic Leadership Award at World HRD Congress. His clients include American Express, Ben & Jerry's, Harvard J&J, Qantas, Voya Financial, Walt Disney World. His work is featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Time, and USA Today. That's amazing, right? My goodness. Well, this is definitely going to be one of my favorite topics is trust. So I am definitely looking forward to this. Dennis, are you there?
I am, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you, Marilee. And you are correct; it is Reina,
All
uh,
right.
and and in fact, Reina means queen in
Y-
Italian and Spanish.
Yes, I
And my
know that
wife
well.
lets me know that every day.
I know that very well. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, you know what, Dennis, can you turn up your volume just a little bit so I don't miss anything?
Sure. How's this? Is this better?
Yeah, that's better. Okay.
Right.
So your title is The Trustworthy Entrepreneur, a coaching guide, right? And
Absolutely.
before we get into that though, your chapter and all these awesome tips and everything, I really am interested to know what led you to the importance of trust.
Well, it actually all started on the walls of Yosemite National Park. You see, I graduated from my undergraduate work in marketing in 1972. So I've been around the planet a little while. And I wasn't ready to join at the time the military industrial complex. So I listened to Horace Greeley. He said, "Go west, young man." And I did. And I packed up the old VW microbus and I traveled around the States and Canada for about a year. And I was in San Francisco. This was coming from the East Coast. So I was in San Francisco on my way to Big Sur. Also in 1972, my hair was down the middle of my back and I had a ponytail, etc. Um, uh, and somebody said, you really ought to check out Yosemite National Park. And I said, okay, I'll check it out for the weekend. And I drove into the park, and the van broke down. And back then, credit cards were just starting in 1972, and they weren't prolific by any means. I looked at my wallet. I had $80 worth of traveler's checks, and the bill was $879, and could have been $8 gazillion. It didn't matter. I didn't have it, right? So I needed to get a job at least for 4 weeks and get the van out of the shop. And I went to back then they called them personnel offices, and they said, "What do you got?" And I said, "Well, I proudly said, well, I've got a bachelor's degree in marketing from the University of Maryland." And they looked at me and they said, "So what? What else you got?" And so I had to dig deep. And I said, "Well, I was 2 merit badges away from Eagle Scout before the troop fall. They said, "Good, you're hired. Report to the Mountaineering Center."
Hmm.
And within 6 months, I was learning climbing and cross country skiing because the seasons were changing. And I learned how to climb, and that was very instrumental. When you've got somebody on belay, you really learn about trust, because the truth of the matter is, when you're on those big walls in Yosemite, um, you've got their life in your hands, and vice versa. They've
I
got
can't even
your life
imagine.
in their hands. And
Mm-hmm.
so you really learn about trust at a very deep, visceral level when you're suspended 1,000 feet in the air or more. And so I learned about that, and the 4 weeks actually turned into 4 years. So I got somewhat proficient in climbing, somewhat proficient in cross country skiing. And at the end of the 4 years, I was at a buying show in Las Vegas, and I met Johannes von Trapp of the Trapp Family Lodge, The Sound of Music. He was the little boy in the movie, and he invited me back east to run his ski touring center in 1976. And that's how I got to Stowe the first time, over 40, actually 47 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and I ran the ski touring center, and taught. Actually, I used to take Maria, as in the Sound of Music lady, out every Tuesday and Thursday. She didn't look anything like Julie Andrews, but she was a quite a hoot. Anyway, um, but the whole notion of trust still stood with me. And so when I went on to my first master's, and then my second, first master's was holistic health education. My second master's was in organizational development on my way to my doctorate. And that was about 31 years ago. And I devoted actually the last 30 to 31 years in really the study and the science of trust and trust building,
Mm-hmm.
what it is, what builds it, what breaks it, and how to rebuild it. And so the chapter, The Trustworthy Entrepreneur, is really a guide for entrepreneurs about understanding trust, the power when it is kept, the pain when it is betrayed, and the transformation that occurs when it's renewed.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Marilee, more than ever, and I said these same words 30 years ago, but more than ever, we need trust in our workplaces.
Oh
And
yeah.
it seems to
100%.
be popping up all over. The
Mm-hmm.
truth of the matter is all business is conducted via relationships, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And trust is the foundation of effective relationships. I mean, it's how we meaningfully connect with
Mm-hmm.
one another.
Absolutely. Across the board. I mean, not just in business, but our friendships and our,
Our person,
love life, our children, everyone.
exactly, when you're faithful or not, when you're loyal or not, it all is based upon a foundation of trust. And so, what I tried to do in this chapter is really lay out an easy to understand framework for people to how to, well, first of all, what is trust? And we lay out the 3 dimensions of trust and the specific behaviors that contribute to each of these 3 dimensions, and to give people, if you will, a guide to see how they're doing in managing trust in their relationships. Because again, business is based upon relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the genesis of how I got into this whole notion of what trust is. And if you like, I'll go into the explanation of the 3 dimensions, etc. But I wanted to pause right there and just give you a moment to ask any questions or to reflect on this
Well,
chapter.
it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I love listening to you, and Yeah, my questions will definitely come. I want to cover the three C's. I think that there's a consensus. We all understand the importance of trust. We want to be able to trust people, but why can't we? What is preventing us from being able to trust not only each other, but our ability to recognize what is trustworthy?
Mhm. No, exactly. Well, and that is key. And so because trust is not something you can see, something that you can tangibly, slice and dice or whatever, but you feel it. And when trust is present, everything is possible. But when trust is absent, that's when you feel it at its deepest, most visceral level. You know, it's almost as if you felt like you were kicked in the gut, punched in the stomach,
Mm-hmm.
stabbed in the back. I mean, very visceral, very demonstrative words to describe the breach of trust or the when it is betrayed. And yet it is so critical to the fluidity, if you will, of relationships.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think? Can you give me some examples of what are the things that we do to break somebody's trust?
Well, for example, at work, when we don't deliver as promised. And that speaks to the trust of character,
Mm-hmm.
acting with integrity in your actions, keeping your word, and delivering as promised. Okay. And there are a number of behaviors under that, which I'll, within our time together, be more than happy to explore. Um, there's also the second dimension, trust of communication, how open and honest and truthful we are in our communications with one another. And when we make a mistake, do we have the courage to take responsibility and own those mistakes?
Right. Well, a lot of times accountability is a tough one, right?
Yes.
Because when we're not accountable, what we, I think that what we tend to do is defend ourselves and then place blame somewhere else.
Right, exactly. And accountability really speaks to that trust of character,
Yes.
delivering on promises that we've made, and being and of course all three dimensions are interrelated, but that accountability starts with our trust of character. And doesn't that start any relationship, whether it be personal or professional? Trust of character, who we are as people, who we are as, are we trustworthy or not? Can we be counted on? Can we come through as promised? That is critical. And that speaks to our trust of character. And then how open and honest we are, how truthful we are in our communications, and how transparent. That's
Hmm.
trust of communication. But there's also a third dimension, Marilyn. It's trust of capability. How well we acknowledge and leverage the skills and abilities of ourselves, and also of one another, our coworkers, and the people that we serve, as well as the people we live with and love. How well
Hmm.
do we acknowledge those skills and abilities, and involve them in decisions, particularly that affect either their jobs or maybe even their lives? And
Right.
how well do we help them learn and grow? Those are the kinds of behaviors that are related to trust of capability.
So if I'm able to edify somebody else, if I'm able to recognize somebody's abilities and have no problem voicing, my gratitude for them, do you think that equates to having self-awareness?
Well, not only that, But what we're finding in our research and what has been found in others' research to corroborate ours is that when you acknowledge someone's skills and abilities, when you are genuinely grateful for what they're contributing, it not only helps them feel confident and comfortable in their own being, but it actually benefits you, the acknowledger, even more than it does the person who you are acknowledging.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the neuroscience of that is basically what neuroscience teaches us, Marilee, is that the brain has a biological bias towards the negative.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I screwed up. Oh, what an idiot I am. You know how the self-talk goes on when we make a mistake, or we didn't do something right, or we didn't, we
Mm-hmm.
failed to deliver whatever the case may be, right? When we actually acknowledge someone else and show true gratitude towards them, it helps us shift to the positive. And it also benefits us even more than it does the person we're acknowledging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, when I'm listening, I see people responding to others, it's still a lack of self-awareness, that we don't understand how to actually earn that trust with others. We don't know what we're doing.
Well, yes. Well, how you earn trust with others is, if you will, I'll take you through at a high level the behaviors that build the three dimensions.
Okay.
We'll start with trust of character because, quite frankly, that is the starting point of any relationship, particularly a business relationship,
Mm-hmm.
if not a personal one. But managing expectations. How well do we actually manage? Are our expectations understood by others? Are they being met? And where can we say yes and where can we say no? Taking an inventory of that, just a self, you're talking about self awareness, just taking that self awareness with ourselves to really help us understand how are our expectations being understood, how are expectations being met, where can we say yes and where can we say or no, or they're not being met. And more importantly is, how do we respond? How do you respond? How do I respond when our expectations are met, maybe with gratitude and appreciation, but also how do we respond when they are not met?
Right.
And establishing boundaries, how well. So managing expectations is an absolutely key behavior for trust of character as the starting point of any relationship. And then establishing boundaries. And at work, it's our roles and our responsibilities. And in this day and age, with the changes that are going on and with COVID happening, et cetera, and all, those roles and responsibilities can be and most likely are changing, and they are morphing, etc. But how clear are we in understanding our our roles and responsibilities and what needs to be clarified, either with our coworkers, with ourselves, with our bosses, etc. And then the
Okay.
third behavior, there are six behaviors that contribute to trust of character, is
Well,
delegating appropriately.
before we go
How
on to those, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. So, to back up just a little bit, when we're talking about expectations,
Yes,
sometimes the problem is that the expectation is not just for how the job is going to get done, but the expectation is for that person to understand what your expectations are without ever voicing them.
exactly. So being clear and explicit, making the implicit explicit, is absolutely critical to establishing and managing expectations.
So that self awareness comes in. You have to look at yourself and go, okay, this is what I'm expecting and it's not happening. And I'm getting really frustrated right now that this is not, I can't control this person. And I feel that they should know better. So all this is on internally, right?
Right.
But there's no communication whatsoever. So that expectation is you're making me very angry because you should know better. You should know how to do that job.
And it happens every day, doesn't it?
Yes,
In the workplace and even in our personal lives. And in
that's right.
fact, relationships break up because of expectations when they're not clearly defined, and boundaries are not established, etc. And so that's why I was saying managing expectations is an absolute critical trust of character behavior.
Hmm.
And I, rather than go through all of these, I'll just name them. So there's delegating appropriately, encouraging mutually serving intentions. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is I've got your back, you've got my back. We're in this together, win-win. And what are our intentions? Again, it's a self-awareness thing. Do we have a self-serving agenda, or are we other minded? Are What I mean by that is, are we not only thinking about ourselves in very selfish ways, but also are we taking into account the people we work with, our coworkers and our partners, at work, or even those with whom we live with and love? Encouraging mutually serving intentions. Are we in this together? Do we come from a win-win uh, point of view? I got your
Well,
back, you've got my back.
I think that, humanity as a whole, we want to have each other's back, right? We really do. And we really want to believe that we are trustworthy. And so when we walk into this situation where there's you and I, we are going to be in agreement. It's like, okay, I want to feel comfortable that you do have my back. And I'm telling you that I have your back until emotions, flare up. If you
Yes.
do something that crosses me, now this is where my character comes in.
Well, exactly. And it goes right back to maybe expectations. How clear and explicit were your expectations or not,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so forth. And so I think the whole notion of, in mutually serving intentions, and of course actions that come out of those intentions, need to be clearly communicated with others, whether it be your coworkers or with your boss. And when the work is, for example, delegated, etc. How clear are we? Or even in our with our partners that we live with and love, how clear are we in our, there are certain boundaries, obviously, that are at play. Some are very explicit, some are not, and so but I tell you what, if you cross those boundaries, you'll definitely know and hear about it, that's for sure.
Hmm.
um,
So
so
let's
yeah.
back up a little bit. So this thing about expectations, right? So I think I'm gonna be loyal because I'm a good person. Dennis, you can trust me. And then you're gonna say the same thing, and then I get upset because I expected something that you didn't deliver on, not because you promised it, but just because I'm expecting that you should know better,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So in that moment, I'm upset that you didn't deliver on my expectation. So the trust is broken.
Yes.
What do we do?
Exactly. Well, first of all, you need to acknowledge what is so. You need to acknowledge the behaviors that, you need to acknowledge the transactions. You need to acknowledge where the transgression was, okay, and how they feel about it. Okay, now what we're getting into is our 7 steps for healing, which is another whole process,
Hmm.
and so forth. But the first is acknowledging what has happened, and also acknowledging the feelings of this person. Okay, because that being said, they may be very upset. they may be extremely angry or mad, etc. And what we need to do is to acknowledge those feelings, and then we need to be able to get support in some way, whether it be from ourselves, usually a coach or counselor, whatever. And we need to be able to reframe the experience. What was the bigger picture? What was going on for them that, or what was going on for me that caused me to not meet those expectations, or not deliver as promised, or not to come through on my word, or to be disloyal, or whatever the case may be, whatever the transgression is.
Right. So I know that a lot of this is pertaining to business because that's, obviously your profession. And, when I'm listening, though, it's everywhere across the board. So if we're going to make it real, like in a real life situation, we're at home, people are arguing because there was that expectation. And then it's followed by the silent treatment,
Yes.
right? And then the silent treatment, the other person doesn't know what the heck's going on. What did I do? Just tell me what, and I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Then there's the avoidance, right?
And
And when you,
that's
what do you do?
and that's why then you have to then there's two others: honor agreements and be consistent in your behavior. Of course, that refers to expectation, but that's why trust of communication, the second dimension, is so critical. Now, the truth of the matter is, in real life, all three of these dimensions are intertwined. All three of these dimensions are interrelated and, quite frankly, interactive. But first and foremost is you've got to share information, trust of communication. The first behavior, sharing information. What was going on with the individual and what's happening, and so forth, and giving that person feedback. Okay, that's another, giving and receiving feedback is another trust of communication behavior that's absolutely essential. Um, so sharing information. How well do we share the information? Now, at work, it might be with our coworkers, etc. Do we give them not only the specific information needed to do their specific function or job or role, but do we give them the contextual information, why that's important, why that is so critical to the um, delivery of this product or this project or this, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera.
You know what, Dr. Dennis, you have a tough job. And the reason why you have a tough job is because, when we're looking at people in the workplace, we have to, first of all, take them out of the workplace,
Yeah.
where they came from, how they were raised, what they're carrying with them, right? Who they are. And if they lack character, if they don't know how to be that person that you're talking about when they enter into the business realm, right?
Yeah.
There's no loyalty because you just work together. You're working for a paycheck. And so I don't really like you. I don't really like you. We're supposed to be doing this. So these skills that we're talking about, building that trust, it's like, I think a lot of times it's like, why?
Well, the first is, I want to go back to what I said way back when, is that business is conducted via relationships, and
Hmm.
effective relationships are based upon a solid foundation of trust. And in order to have trust, you need to practice in some form, shape, or modicum these three dimensions: trust of character, we do what we say we're going to do, and we deliver as promised; trust of communication, we communicate openly and honestly and transparently; and trust of capability, we acknowledge and leverage the skills of one another. And there are specific behaviors under each of those three dimensions, which, but if you don't, let me tell you, either it's not a good fit and you join the ranks of the great resignation, or you stay. And let me tell you, it's a long road, a hard road, because if you're just working a job for the paycheck, let me tell you, it's going to get very trying, very boring, and quite frankly, very tedious. And you're going to definitely either go before your time, whether it be you give up the ghost, or you leave the job, you leave the workforce, whatever the case may
And,
be.
and that's exactly, I believe, is our problem. You're going to keep changing jobs because you don't like the work environment and you don't like the people that you work with. So, just like a romantic relationship where you keep cycling through people trying to find the right one, it's like you got to look at yourself and go, but I'm not the right one. I am not the right one. I don't know. I
Exactly.
don't, right? I don't have that character. I can't deliver this promise. I don't even know what's wrong.
Well, and that's the thing. Would I be want to be in a relationship with me? You know,
Right.
I mean, that's
Yes.
what it comes. Do I keep my word? Do I deliver as promised? Do I acknowledge and leverage the skills and help people learn and grow and involve them? So, it's when we don't practice these behaviors, it it really undermines the relationship,
Yes.
and that is so critical. And whether it be a working relationship or a romantic relationship, all these, they may, all these, truth of the matter is, all of these behaviors come into play, whether it's a working or a romantic relation. They just happen to, some are become more important than others,
Hmm.
whether it be a working relationship or a romantic relationship. Okay.
Right. So on the job, when it comes to the hierarchy, you have your boss, you have an employee. And if that boss doesn't know how to build trust with their employees, there's going to be a power struggle.
Absolutely. There'll be a power struggle, and people will be maybe jockeying for position. They may be, one-upmanship, one down,
Hmm.
whatever the case, putting other people down to make themselves look good, etc., etc. None of that is trustworthy. None of that speaks to what we're talking about here today.
Hmm.
So, the behaviors that build trust, the community, sharing information. Do we give them the information they need? Telling the truth is follows, and is it safe to tell the truth? Or are we going to get, our heads cut off if we, tell the truth, or cut off at
Right.
the knees, whatever metaphor you want to use, you know?
Well, typically there's the truth and then there's the version of our truth because you're going to bend it a little to make sure you don't look so bad or, you're getting what you want, whatever. It just can't be the truth and
Well,
then see
yeah,
what
and
happens.
exactly, and are there times that we tend to be inclined to spin the truth? What you're talking about, and
Hmm.
what factors, though? What factors contribute to that? What fact and why
Fear.
do we maybe even feel justified in doing that? You know,
Hmm.
is it to look good? Is it to impress, quote unquote, our boss? Whatever the case may be,
I,
etc.
I would say it's insecurity and a fear of a lack of
Exactly.
acceptance, right?
Exactly. Exactly. When we're not secure, and again, by practicing these behaviors, we actually become more trusting of ourselves, which then contributes to more self-confidence and our self-esteem and feelings of self-worth, which then fuels our, again, our capacity for trust, which is at the heart and at the core of our model and at the framework of our relationship, because it all starts with us. Trust begins with me, trust begins with you, trust begins with each and every one of us.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
I was just going to say, another behavior is admitting mistakes. I spoke to that earlier, but how well do we admit mistakes? How well do we is it even safe to admit mistakes? And that goes along with telling the truth, and in what ways, when we trip up and blow it, or whatever the case may be, do we take responsibility for those
Hmm.
mistakes?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that the more you actually accept responsibility for those mistakes, the easier it gets.
Yeah,
And then you lose the fear, right?
exactly. Exactly. You lose the fear, and you say, hey, I did make a mistake. All right, I own it. My bad, whatever the case may be. and I am going to now do whatever it takes to make up for that mistake or rectify that mistake or correct that mistake, etc. And
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes
well,
it's just done, right?
sometimes it is done. Sometimes the relationship is over,
Mm,
or now at work, you may or may not have a choice.
mm,
Okay, you may have to work with people, but if people who I want to work with people who deliver as promised, who keep their word, and who acknowledge those skills and involve me in decisions, particularly those that affect my job and my life. Those are the kind of people that I want to be working with and engaged in.
right?
You know,
Exactly. It's how trust is imperative with ourself and with every single person around us. It doesn't matter what building we're in or what hat we're wearing. And until we really understand like the depths of, of oh, I'm sorry. Chris, I saw you. You know what, Dennis? This is a new platform. And would you like to take a question, Dennis?
yes. Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to Chris.
No.
Yes. No. Absolutely.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, look, Chris, let me bring you up. Mm, there we go. Chris, welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your room and discussion. Kind offer to let me speak. Hello to both of you.
Hello,
So
Chris.
before we take your question, I just want to preface that this is an interview with Dr. Dennis Reyna, and he is my co-author in Cracking the Rich Code. And so today we're talking about the importance of trust. Yeah, because I know you came
Fantastic.
in, yeah, a little later. So yeah, what would you like to ask Dr. Dennis or say?
Well, as I said, my name's Chris Rossetti in San Francisco. And my question is this: how important is respect in the aspect of trust, relationships, love, workplace? It seems to me in my life experience that respect sometimes or maybe always trumps all those other things or has to be there. So I'd love to hear your take on that, and I'll go back to the audience. Thank you so much.
Sure. No,
Wonderful, Chris.
Chris,
Thank
that's a
you.
great question. Thank you so much for asking it. I think respect comes as a byproduct of practicing these. When we deliver as promised consistently, okay, when we are able to give and receive feedback. Hey, I made a mistake. I blew it, or I didn't know how to do something, and you own that and take responsibility for that, or helping others to learn and acknowledge their skills and abilities. So I think respect is a byproduct of that, and in that regard, as a byproduct and as a product of or a byproduct of these three dimensions of trust, yes, I would respect that individual who practices. And let me tell you, these behaviors are not easy. Day in and day out, practicing these. It's one thing, and we've been researching and writing in this field. Chris, before you came on, we were talking about a little bit of my background, and I've been researching and writing in this field for 31 years, and I actually learned about the first inkling that I really got in touch with how important trust is on the walls of Yosemite National Park. And by the way, San Francisco is one of my most favorite cities in the world. But I was running the Mountaineering Center in Yosemite National Park for 4 years back in the early mid 70s, and I learned about trust when you've got somebody on belay 1,000 or more feet in the air on El Cap or Half Dome or the Apron or the Royal Arches or whatever, all those different climbs in the valley. Let me tell you, you learn about trust from a very deep, visceral level. And I wanted to further understand this thing called trust because I knew it. When you're on belay, you got somebody's life in your hands, and vice versa. They got, anyway. Um, I wanted to understand it from more of an theoretical and an academic, because I knew it from a visceral level. And that's what spurred me on to devote the next 30 some years in really understanding this thing called trust and so forth. So respect, I would say, is a byproduct and comes out of the practice of these behaviors. Now, do we always get them all right and do it? No, hell no. And that's why I guess we're on the planet here. There's always room for improvement, and as Miss Merrily would say, well, how self-aware are we, and the more we're aware of how well we practice these behaviors and where we need improvement and where we need to work on, then that is okay. That's our life's journey. That's our life's work. That's what it's about. But I think we earn the respect over time, and just like trust is built over time, little by little, incrementally.
So, Dennis, I have a comment.
Yes.
To that. And Chris, thank you for bringing that up, because it's very, very important. And it's like a huge piece of it. With respect, if somebody is not respectful,
yes,
there's no way somebody else is going to trust you or trust them.
Right?
If you walk into the room and you're not respectable, you've lost it instantly. What do you think, Dennis?
Oh, absolutely. And again, it comes to, how, whether you're speaking openly and honestly or gibberish, whether you're acknowledging people or trying to put them down to look good or whatever, or whether you're, on the job, delivering expectations, and your expectations are unrealistic or not doable within a certain time frame or a certain whatever. That's not respectful of the people who you're speaking to or about. So again, these behaviors come into play, and the byproduct becomes trust, or the lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that, without respect, there is no trust. Period.
No, and when you delve in deeper, somewhere along the line, maybe people didn't give or were not willing to receive maybe constructive feedback, which is so important, and that's a key trust of communication behavior. I would say, they're all important. There are 6 behaviors of trusted communication, sharing information, telling the truth, admitting mistake, giving and receiving feedback. And how well are we and how willing are we to receive feedback plays into also that respect question for sure. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe this is a good time to add in the part about your boundaries. How important are boundaries where respect is involved? That's concern that equals trust.
Well, absolutely. So, and that brings me to the next behavior, maintaining confidentiality. That's a boundary. If somebody shared something in confidence that was a personal item or issue or concern or a challenge or a vulnerability of theirs with me, and then I end up blabbing it all over town, that's not very respectful of them, and 2, I've breached their confidentiality. Mm-hmm. And I broke their trust right then and there. And so, and that's a boundary that they set, so that is key right there. And then the last behavior is of trusted communication is speaking with good purpose. And what I mean by that, the opposite of speaking with good purpose is gossip and backbiting. Now, what we have found from our research, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, gossip and the rumor mill tend to run rampant, particularly during times of change. Yet gossip between individuals about individuals will destroy. In fact, it is the number one killer of trust within teams. Mm-hmm. Gossip and backbiting. Absolutely.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because my show last night was exactly that.
Oh,
Those rumors and gossip. Yep.
yeah. And then God, and so speaking with good purpose, how well do we bring up, for example, if we have an issue or concern, if you have an issue or concern with me, Miss Merrily, and you bring it to my attention, I will definitely do whatever I can and need to do within my power and then some to acknowledge that and to work on whatever I need to work on. Um, so when you directly address issues and concerns with the individuals involved, not only is that trustworthy, but it also gives them an opportunity to do something about it versus making insinuating remarks or sliding digs behind their back, etc., etc.
But
So,
but don't you think that takes a little bit of diplomacy? Otherwise, people get offended.
well, it takes diplomacy, yes. Now, some people can't, it's kind of like what's that Jack Nicholson movie, you can't handle the truth, right?
Right.
Um, it does and some people can't handle the truth. Absolutely.
Hmm.
So it does take diplomacy and how you say it. It's not even so much what you say, but how you say it is absolutely critical.
Hmm. And
You know,
that goes right back to Chris's point about
absolutely.
respect.
Respect. Respect. I
Yeah,
will respect somebody up and down, left and right, who brings something to my attention that I need to work on, and they do it in a very honorable and respectful way and bring it to my awareness and my attention versus somebody who's talking behind my back and gossiping about da 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 da, da,
right.
right?
But the key right there, what you said is, if I brought it to you respectfully.
Hmm.
So oftentimes we have a problem with that. We can't we can't express ourselves in a respectful manner to where we don't offend somebody, the person that we're telling. And
Yeah.
so the moment you hurt them, it's like you already lost it. I'm not
Well,
hearing.
the whole notion around trust is reciprocal. It's a two-way street. I think if we did it in a very respectful way where we acknowledged what was going on, not blaming or finger pointing or cause or pointing the finger at them as people, but it might be a behavioral thing, okay?
Hmm.
And if we're talking about the behavior, maybe they shared confidential information inappropriately,
Hmm.
when you entrusted them with the information in confidence. um,
Let me ask you something. If that were the case, right, and they
yes.
lost your trust, how do you build that back?
Again, is to it first of all, sometimes it's very hard. Sometimes
Yeah.
it may not be an opportunity at all, but where you can build a trust, that's actually our second book on rebuilding trust in the workplace. Um, but we have a chapter in our seminal book, Trust and Betrayal in the Workplace. Um, it's actually gone over three editions, and most time when people write a second or third edition, they may tweak a chapter or two. No, we rewrote the whole book. Absolutely. Well, because over the years, and that started, it came out, the first edition came out in the 90s and then the early 2000s, and then lastly it was 2000, and well, we're actually due for another book here pretty soon. 2015 was our last edition. But rebuilding trust is, again, acknowledging what has happened and acknowledging the feelings that the impact of what you did on that other person or other people. Okay, that's absolutely critical. And then being able to gain and get support, whether it be, again, with a coach, a counselor, whatever, coach like yourself, except to be able to reframe the experience. What was the bigger picture? What options and choices do I now have? How can I make this right? How can I deliver as promised? Or, sometimes you can't take it back, right? But how can I make good and take responsibility, which is actually step 5. And also the step 6 is about forgiveness. It's about forgiving ourselves as well as the other person. Or if we did the harm, is to acknowledge that and to make reparations, but also at some point to forgive ourselves. We're only human. We're on this planet for a certain amount of time, and we're doing our work, or hopefully we're doing our work. Maybe we're not doing our work, but hopefully we are. I think
Yes.
that's critical for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Before we close today, I would like to just cover a little bit of the third dimension, trust of capability.
Okay.
And that's acknowledging the skills and abilities of one another and helping people learn and grow. I think it's important. What we started the conversation, I know Chris and Elvis and some of the other folks that have come and gone may not have heard this at the very beginning, but when you acknowledge someone else and you are grateful for their contributions, whether it be to you or coworkers, etc., not only do you make them feel good and comfortable and confident and empower them, but you're actually, the benefit is even greater to yourself. And the reason is what neuroscience shares with us is that the brain has a biological bias towards the negative, and by acknowledging others and being grateful for their contribution, we're actually helping our brains shift to the positive, and it actually benefits us even more because it enhances our own well-being and our own sense of empowerment when we acknowledge others. and
Absolutely.
and so I thought that was actually when I first found that, years ago. I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. We acknowledge someone else, but we're actually benefiting even more or even greater than they are. And then also empowering people to make decisions. Not only just allowing them, but empowering them to make decisions. And when you might have observed some poor judgment maybe in others, how do you respond? Um, and do you give people an opportunity to make it right with you or with the circumstance and situation? And then the third behavior under trust of capability is involving others and seeking their input. And people have greater ownership when they're involved in decisions and when they're involved in projects and programs that they contributed to, and it empowers them. And again, of course, it strengthens you and it strengthens the relationship, because as we said at the very beginning of the program, right, business is conducted via relationships, and effective relationships are based upon a foundation of trust. And then the last behavior is helping people learn new skills, maybe uncovering positive emotions, motivations in others, and how safe do we make the environment to help them learn and grow? Because at the bottom line, at the end of the day, and this is where, of course, respect can come in too, Chris, is when people have given us opportunities that we may not even seen that we've had in ourselves, but gave us an opportunity to learn and grow in that job. That is huge. And, to help to acknowledge that and to leverage those skills and abilities, that's something to really help people learn and grow in those jobs. I mean, I think that really is powerful when we're able to do that.
I agree with that. It is powerful, but there's so many spokes on that wheel that we need to strengthen and understand and identify,
Yeah,
because when we have a project, we feel good when we're putting our heart into it, our creativity into it. We're putting everything into this project and we're relying on other people to do the same thing.
yeah,
And when somebody breaks that trust, you're looking at the project, you're so disappointed because it's like, why? I put my whole life into this thing. Why did you disappoint me?
Right. Maybe
And
they didn't.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, maybe they didn't deliver as promised, or maybe they didn't come through as you expected, right? Etc.
Well, again, it comes back to the point of respect,
Yeah.
that having the self-respect that,
Yes.
you don't want to let people down. And so that's where the accountability comes in, right?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And as we said earlier, the accountability really, uh, I mean, it lies with all three dimensions, but it starts right there at trust of character.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And what we have found is that these three dimensions are mutually reinforcing and they're reciprocal. That when you start to go to work, the good news is when you start to go to work on one or two of them, they all seem to rise, if you will, or get better.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Because they're
and
intertwined.
what's that?
Because they're intertwined.
They are intertwined, they're interrelated, absolutely.
Mm.
And, it's interesting. We also, at Reina Trust Building, we also have developed statistically valid and reliable assessments that measure trust at the individual level, the leader, the team, the organizational levels, even at the customer levels, and where you can really hone in on what are those behaviors that you're doing well and you want to strengthen and bolster and leverage. And what are those behaviors that might be vulnerable that you want to pay attention to and take advantage of. Anyway, so trust building is not easy work, but it's needed and definitely necessary. And at the bottom line, trust begins with me, trust begins with you, trust begins with each and every one of us.
That's right. Dr. Dennis, thank you so much for coming on the show today and giving us your wisdom and, just reiterating the fact that trust is everything. It's so important. And Chris, thank you for coming to the stage and, mentioning respect, because without respect, there is no trust, period. Right?
Absolutely. And thank you, Elvis, too, for joining in. We so appreciate that. And I hope
Absolutely.
that this has been somewhat helpful, if not enlightening, for you all.
Absolutely. And I have your email there so you can get a hold of Dr. Dennis here.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can take a screenshot really quick and get it on there. So, anyway, have a wonderful, beautiful day. It has been an absolute pleasure. And everybody, thank you so much for joining me on Cracking the Rich Code today. You can find us on Facebook, and we have a new platform coming out. You can get the books on Amazon. And if you have any questions, just send me an email at marilee@therichcodeclub.com. All right. Much love to all of you. Dr. Dennis, have a beautiful, wonderful day. God bless
Well,
you.
thank you so much, Miss Marilee.
You're welcome. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.